Hi there, lovelies. All right, it's time for our last portal opening in the series of 3. Welcome. Let's see here. As you all join us, what we're talking about right now is creating possibility where there seemingly might be none. Hold on. Seemingly, of course, doesn't mean actually. So this for me is my favorite of the 3 new innate abilities, because it came about through a series of things. One is through our alumni of flight school. I don't know if you know this, but we get together once a month, and in that getting together once a month, we have profound, deep conversations. And although I can't recreate the experience of what we did in Mount Shasta last year, what it did is it actually launched the potential for an activation or an operating system that allows human beings to transcend polarity, arguments, struggle in a split second. Why did that come about? Because most of the time, think about it, most of the time when we get into struggle or when we have an issue in life, just think of maybe one you have right now. You know, you might have an argument with your body. Your body's not doing what you wish it would do. Or maybe your business isn't flourishing the way you wish it would. Or maybe your relationship or your lack of relationship is what's going on. So, or maybe the relationship you're in is really having a hard time and you don't know what to say. So what happened was, way back when I was having a struggle with finances, I was trying to understand how I get our business to the next level and how I do it when I didn't really know, whenever you get to the next level, you don't really know what you're doing by definition, because if you did know what you were doing, you'd already be at the next level, whether it's in your relationship, in your business, with your finances, with your health, whatever it is. So you're in the land of not knowing. But you see, most people are incredibly uncomfortable with the land of not knowing. By the way, say yes if you've ever been uncomfortable with being in the land of not knowing, i.e. with having no clue which way to head, not having confidence in what you're being shown. If you're uncomfortable sometimes with being in that space and you scramble to find something to do or say or act on, and if you have a week or 2 weeks where there's nothing to act on, it makes you really super uncomfortable, just type in yes or send me a couple of hearts and let me know that that's so. So, but what we forget is that when we're being given a blank slate or the space between the atoms, and let me describe what I mean in a second. When we're being given that silent space, there's actually an opportunity to come to terms or have an idea or a creative moment that takes you on a journey of quantum leaps beyond where you were before. I'm going to give you guys an example of zero pointing, okay? Because this is it's hard for people to grasp, but I know you guys can do it. See if you can do it, if you can get this, okay? So what happens, let me give you an example. And by the way, just so you know what we're going to do, first I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what this is, because you need to know what it is before we actually talk about it. A lot of people think they know what zero pointing is, but they actually don't, because there's a whole new paradigm for that. And we're doing the operating system about it. So first I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Then we're going to get present and show you what it isn't. And then what we're going to do is we're going to dive into the activation together so that you can pull possibility out of your butt. In other words, you can make you can find quantum leap solutions to any issue in a very short amount of time. And you can get much more comfortable with being in the unknown. So are you guys up for that? Are you excited for that? Does that feel good? Is it something you want to do? So just give me some hearts or some yeses and let me know that it's something that it actually speaks to you. So, all right, so here we go. So first of all, an example. I want to show you an example of zero pointing. I remember that we were recently on a retreat called Soaring, and we were there in Sedona, Arizona. And I was like, God, how am I going to have this conversation? There was a conversation that I wanted to have about time, or I wanted to have another, there were several conversations that I didn't know how we were going to bridge them. And even with specific people, right? I didn't know how I was going to bridge the conversations. And sometimes in programs, there are people that are really super resistant. So what happens is I can feel them and I don't address it head on, because if I addressed it head on, there would be too much volatility or too much energy there. There would be too much resistance to the conversation. So what I do is I basically zero point it, meaning I fall in love with the idea of not knowing. So I'm going to say it again. I fall in love with the space between the atoms. I'm going to say it again. I fall in love with the idea that consciousness has already created the solution. I just haven't caught up to it yet. I'm going to say it again in a different way. I fall in love with the idea that if I'm going to go to a new place, finding a new level of harmony with any group of people or with any one individual, I need to get to the frequency where the new idea is first, meaning I have to feel as expansive and embody that level of expansiveness such that I can actually receive the idea in the moment when the conversation is presenting. So what happened was we started dancing, and in the starting to dance and starting to move through fluidity, the way we were dancing presented the answer to the question. It also raised the frequency of the other person, that when we sat down and we were trying to answer the question around timing, around how to relinquish resistance, the resistance was already gone, and we could come at it in a way that we could be neutral, and all of a sudden all sorts of new possibilities got created in that moment. Another example of this, of zero pointing, is I remember I was beating myself up after one Christmas. I don't know why, but for some reason I gained a ton of weight and my body did not feel good. My knees hurt, my lower back hurt. I didn't like the way I felt. And I started thinking to myself, God, I've never been this weight. I started collecting evidence for what was wrong for a few weeks, not realizing that that's what I was doing, because I hadn't gained weight, since I was a teenager. I was just always the same weight. So what ended up happening was I realized that I just needed to do things that felt better. So I started to write poetry. I did some art. I did it for weeks, and I just let the idea of letting my body find its way back home go, because I knew that I needed to be in the zero point, and I also needed to be at the frequency where the answers were. Well, my friend approaches me in the meantime and says, Jen, I'm going to do a half marathon. Will you do it with me? By the way, this was for my 40th birthday. Will you do it with me? And I said, well, I'll go to the running room with you and do the exercise, but I'm not doing a half marathon. And she said, that's okay. At first you just walk 10K. And I said, I could walk 10K, no problem. So we were walking, and then I was doing more. Before the month was out, I actually was in better shape than I'd been in a long time. And of course, all the weight went away. And that was because I didn't address the issue head on, not from the polarity of there's something wrong with my body, and not from the polarity of I'm a nutritionist and I know the right way to do it. Both of those are polarities. So the same way in the other scenario where it's like, oh my God, I'm the group leader, I should know how to facilitate the answer. If I came from that polarity, that wouldn't work. Secondly, I could come from the polarity of, oh my God, why do I have to have a difficult student in my class? Or I don't have the skills to deal with this. Now that happens actually all the time in programs. I am constantly in the not knowing. That's why our programs are so powerful, because we quantum leap issues that are presenting such that you don't have to analyze them the rest of your life. That's actually how the whole idea of embodiment came about. Embodiment came about from the idea of 0 point. We've been talking about it for the 12 dimensions of DNA. Now everyone's talking about DNA. We started talking about it 12 years ago. That came from the 0 point I just got shown. Why? Because I was looking for greater answers, and I got really excited about the idea that physics already had those answers. Now in the activation, we're going to include that in the operating system for you, is how to generate the excitement for the future possibility of that answer being right now, and how to get into the state of neutrality with actually a sense of exhilaration for the answer that's already presenting, because you've already asked the question a million times. So how do you get to that 0 point? Now, one might say that I'm talking about the idea of receiving. Again, I'm going to explain this first, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the place of getting ourselves into neutrality, and then we're going to do the activation. But this is such a deep subject that I wanted to make sure that you understand what I'm talking about is not what you might already think it is. Okay? So it is not the idea of manifesting, although you can manifest things from the 0 point. It is not the idea of being neutral, although neutrality is necessary to 0 point. It is not the idea of, going direct with consciousness, although at the 0 point you are going direct with consciousness. It is actually a different idea altogether. It is the idea of coming to the place between the atoms instantaneously, such that you pass the polarity and rise above the polarity, such that you no longer experience the right and wrong, the yes and no, the yin and yang. It's in the place where all exists, but nothing is pulling on you anymore. Whether you're someone else's opinion, someone else's judgment, you no longer consider that. Everything is irrelevant, and in an instant, you're brought to the place where all things cross. Now, one of the other things I want to share is the significance of crosses and how many crosses there's the Chicana in Incan mythology. There is the Brigidine cross which we made when we were in Ireland with the Brigidine nuns. It was amazing. There's, of course, the Christian cross. There's the Ankh. It's amazing how many in Egypt. It's amazing, even in old Celtic ways, there's a cross. There is the Roman cross. It's interesting how many different paradigms there are that actually embody this idea of a cross. Now, what does a cross have to do with what we're talking about right now? Because in a cross, there's all the possibilities this way from one perspective, and there's all the possibilities this way from another perspective. But those two perspectives somewhere have a 0 point where it actually doesn't matter about any of the opinions at either end of the spectrum. It's a 0 point where all comes into common understanding, and the only place where many different perspectives can come into common understanding is the place where you're in connection with the totality of the entire universe. So a cross is highly significant, not necessarily for the ends, but for the actual 0 point where they all come together. Okay, very, very powerful. In that 0 point, you'll find a multi-dimensional, absolutely beautiful flower of life that isn't static, but that's actually ever growing. It's the land of all possibility. I'm finally going to describe it one more way so that you can really get it. So, atoms are what we're made of. Atoms are made of a nucleus with a bunch of nucleus particles. Then they have called protons, and then they have whatever number of electrons floating around on the outside of them. So each of these is made of that. But the problem is, in between each of the orbits of the electrons is space, in between the electrons themselves is space, in between the nucleus and the electron is space, and in between all the different protonic particles is space. And if we say that matter comprises everything, which is completely incorrect, so liquids, gases, and solids comprise everything. No, they actually don't. I mean, they do and they don't. On a three-dimensional plane, they do. But most of what comprises our reality is the space between the electrons, the space between the electron and the nucleus, the space between the protons, the space between the atoms. All of those things comprise way more than 90% of all that exists. You understand? So we're going to do the activation in just a couple of minutes here so that you can start to embody the idea that before there was an atom, there was actually the pure potential that exists between the atoms and between the spaces in the atom, such that you understand that the idea of the atom came long before the atom. The idea of a human came long before the human. And in the space between the atoms and the particles within the atom lies the pure potential of what could be. That space between the atoms, or what could be in three-dimensional reality, that space between is actually the space of 0 point where we have that beautiful flower of life symbol that keeps perpetuating upon itself. You understand? It comes from two circles coming together in a vesica Pisces, or a womb of possibility, and then you can create another one, and then you can create another one. Math has an amazing way, or sacred geometry has an amazing way of demonstrating beautifully the reality of this 0 point. That beautiful geometry is what exists here, the potential for something new to be created. All right? That's why the symbol for the wide awakening is vesica Pisces, you'll notice. So it's the space between the atoms that we're concerned with. All right. So how do we live in the land when we are three-dimensional beings, apparently? How do we access the part of us, the more than 90% of us, that is actually the space between? Because in reality, this conversation is happening in 3D. Do you get it? We're having a conversation. You're hearing my voice vibrations. You're interpreting with your brain, which is 3D. How do we access a place that is beyond where this conversation is happening, such that we can be told all of the possibilities that haven't already happened yet? Well, what we have to do is we have to take our consciousness there. You see, consciousness is not three-dimensional. Your consciousness, your spirit, is multidimensional. So when we access that place, we can go to the 0 point. We can go to the place where all possibility exists. And because we're fingers of the hand of all of creation, we're creator consciousness, meaning when we access that, we can also access ideas that are waiting to come to fruition. Where do those ideas come from? Where do the ideas that exist in this 0 point come from? They are actually made manifest by the asking that you have participated in based on the contrast you've experienced. In other words, oh my gosh, I've got this really resistant participant and I really want to be able to assist them. Oh, consciousness has already answered that. I just haven't accessed it yet. I have to reach a frequency where the answer exists. I guess I'm going to go and play with my day and something's going to come to me and I'm going to deliberately put myself in the place of the frequency of that possibility, and then I'm going to play. Right? So the answer already exists the instant you have a perceived issue. You cannot have a problem without a solution. It's impossible. The way physics works is the instant it wants to help us create upon creation. We were born to create upon creation. So in the design of our journey, having a spirit coming through a three-dimensional body, in the design is, oh, okay, well, if you're going to be creator consciousness in a human body, what we're going to do is every time you come up against contrast, we're actually just going to create the solution instantly, and your job is going to be to catch up to all of the solutions. But the problem is, if you perceive it like catching up, that's not 0 pointing. So the reason why today is so important is because there's so much contrast in the world. Think of all the creations that are waiting to be made manifest. But we get so caught up in the frequency of the issues. Humanity does, you do about your body, you do about politics, you do about economics, you look at your bank account, whatever the case may be. We get so, are you guys picking up what I'm putting down so far? Send me some hearts and say yes if you know what I'm talking about. So, because otherwise, if you don't give me feedback, I don't know. So, you know, you're understanding what I'm saying. You have so many askings in a day. Even just by looking at your body, you have askings. If you have a judgment about your aging, you have askings. Whatever it is. But the answers have already been made manifest as potentials in the 0 point. So what is 0 pointing? It is not manifesting the answer. Usually the idea of manifesting the answer, and I want you to hear this so profoundly, like you've never heard it before, honestly, for all of you who love the idea of manifesting things, most people try to manifest things because they think they would be more comfortable in manifesting the answer to the problem. They believe they would, so it comes from an egoic idea, okay? It comes from the egoic idea that your life is about being more comfortable or it's about having fewer problems. No, your life is about having contrast. You literally are designed to experience the contrast that would make you're a creator, therefore you need contrast in order to create something new. Otherwise, everything would just roll along. When we talk about fluidity, and we're not talking about everything being perfect and you not having any problems. We're talking about in your human design, and all of our human design is to have problems, and you literally were born to have contrast and to wish for things to be more beautiful, more lovely, more happy, not in order that you could get to this place where you can just stand still. No, you were born not to stand still. You were born to have contrast. And a lot of people come into work in personal development and in this wild metaphysical world that I live in, and they aim the wrong direction. I just want to be more comfortable and have everything be safe and predictable. Well, you came here as a creator, it being predictable, the only thing that's predictable is that it's going to change and you're going to have contrast. So part of the art of fluidity is to get excited about being in contrast and excited about change. But you need to have the skills to be able to do that. That's why we do all of our programs. Does that make sense? So contrast is essential to you being a creator. You can't get rid of it, but you can have more ease and get excited about the solutions already being created and become masterful at actually 0 pointing your life so that the solution, it just becomes a constant fun, creative experience where you get to dance with all of the resources of all of creation instead of trying to wrestle them to the ground, which is impossible because creation is always creating upon itself. And if you're trying to wrestle creation to the ground and get it to stop, you're literally going against the flow of life itself. That's not why you're here. So for some of you, you're just here to hear what I just said. That's the totality of, anything else is going to be bonus to you because you now realize that you've been trying to learn all this stuff to get your life to be comfortable by changing your circumstances. But what I'm saying to you is your circumstances are going to consistently be changing. What if you became an agent of awakening? What if you became an agent of enjoying the fluidity of the ever expanding life? Wouldn't that be phenomenal? For some people, you hear that and it's like, yeah, I'm not going to listen to this activation anymore. That doesn't, but usually if it's triggering you a little bit, it would be really important to continue having the conversation because this is not about being happy all the time. Although if you could dance fluidly with the creative expansion of life, you actually would be happy a lot more of the time. It would be exhilarating, in fact. Even with the ups and downs, it would be exhilarating. You stop judging what's happening to you because you would be in anticipation of what the contrast is created. So everybody breathe. Let's just breathe. So let's do the activation of the portal. As I said before, what is the reason for us doing these activations? Because with all the contrast in the world, if you don't master the art of fluidity and going with the changes that are about to happen, and actually I would challenge you, I'm not even going to challenge you, who you were born to be is to be a master bridge builder to a new reality. If you couldn't do that, you wouldn't be born into this time and space. This is a time of space of huge contrast. You must be a leader because you were born. You must be someone who is designed to build the bridges and lead the shifts in some way, or why even be alive right now? Do you understand? So instead of resisting your role as a master bridge builder, as a leader, how about you master it and then life becomes fulfilling and expansive? So that's what this is all about. The contrast, creating enough yearning to be able for people to master the art of being in that 0 point, the space between the atoms, so that the ideas that would change the world and the ways to go about the how-tos of that exist, the whole pathway exists in the space between the atoms and the space between the electrons, the space between the protons, space between all of it. The pure potential of stuff that hasn't yet landed in 3D, which is atomic. All those ideas live in the space between. So the asking of humanity to find the answers and to build the bridges to create new systems lies in being able to live in the 0 point while still being 3D. Does that make sense? So this now you can see why this portal opening is so important to me. So right now I'm going to reiterate what we're doing is we're opening the doorway by bringing light to what it is. So we're already doing a little bit of the activation. We're bringing light to what it is and bringing language to what it is. Sometimes when you come up with new concepts or new codes, it's very difficult to give language because no one's ever come up with them before in that way, right? So bringing language to it brings it to the forefront of our physical reality such that people can start accessing all of the codes to start getting the instructions to build the bridges such that reality would change in your own life and in the world at large, in every system. So can you see why this 0 point activation is so important? Just say yes or send me some hearts or something, press on the heart emoji thing. And then I'll know that you get what I'm saying. So enough people would have had to have asked and enough contrast would have had to have happened in order for us to actually get to this place, okay? So Let's do the activation, shall we? The diabolical plot for world peace is unfolding as we speak. Dum, dum, dum. So now, we are not doing the embodiment of this particular one. As I've said before, that happens in upstate New York. That will be the experience of a lifetime because we'll actually be doing it together. We'll even be coming up with some of the ideas that change humanity. We're actually going to experience firsthand the access to this operating system at the Omega Institute in New York on June 21st. However, what we're doing right now is we're opening the portals. So what that means is we're opening, this next little piece is about opening, finding the lock to the key to the lock to opening a new doorway. And then what we're going to do is we're going to show you what's on the other side of the doorway. It's as though what I'm showing you is a brand new kind of bike that goes like 10 times faster, and that you have never ridden this kind of bike before. And you know what it's like first when you try riding a bicycle. But first you have to know that the bicycle even exists to have the yearning to be able to ride it. So what we're doing is we're showing you the brand new bicycle that exists so that your body can start wiring itself to the possibility of riding the bike. What we're gonna do in upstate New York is we're actually gonna take the training wheels off and you're gonna be riding the bike, right? That's a skill that you will never forget the rest of your life. Riding a bike, you can always get back on a bike and ride it. So that's embodiment. That's what we're gonna do in upstate New York. All right, so here we go. Yeah, and I know so many people are really tired of all the challenges. And the great thing is challenges give birth to some people, they spend their whole life in the challenges and they ask for so many solutions that so many solutions live in the 0 point because of them. But the problem is because they never get to the place of actually slowing down and not trying to control their experience such that they could find the quantum leap solutions that they don't know, which would require them feeling safe in the world and slowing down enough to actually catch up to them and change their reality. But some people are so afraid to be out of control that they never catch up to the very solutions that they ask for. But other people, because they love change and they've mastered the art of being a change master and an agent of awakening, are the ones that catch up to the very ideas that other people who live in constant challenge have been asking for. Seems unfair, but it's not unfair. Everyone can catch up to those solutions. Anyone can. It's just you have to choose whether you want to go on that ride or not. And it really means being courageous and letting go of everything that you know. It's scary for a lot of people. But it's fun once you start to embody all these skills. Can't wait to show you, but let's do the portal first. Everybody breathe. So let's breathe. But as we breathe, I'm going to remind you, as we breathe, the breath, the oxygen is a metaphor. The oxygen is received by the lungs, goes throughout your body, and you breathe out that which is no longer pertaining to you. It no longer is needed. It's much like our elimination organs. You take out what's needed, you eliminate what's not needed. So you also now have a new asking for more nutrients. You also have a new asking as you breathe out for more oxygen. So imagine that your receptor sites on the outside of more than 30 trillion cells. That's more than 10,000 times the number of people on the planet is the number of cells that commune with each other through chemicals, that talk to each other. And these cells live in perfect, blissful harmony with each other, communing and operating your body without you. Imagine that these same cells operate not only with each other that way, but actually these same cells commune with all of consciousness that way, the space between the atoms, through photon packages of light, which are subatomic. They're not atomic. Photon packages of light exist between the atoms. They exist in a dimension that is extraneous to the idea of atoms. atoms exist in a sea of photons. So imagine that your cells every second are receiving trillions of packets of information that help you run your body, that help you be able to hear, that help your heart pump without you, that help the oxygen exchange without you. You don't have to tell your body to do that. There are photon packages of light coming from infinite intelligence that allow all of that to happen. And imagine that as you breathe in the living metaphor of oxygen exchanging to and from your lungs, there's also an exchange of photon packages of light that's surging into you, and the askings that your body have are surging out of you as photon packages of light. Who you are exists mostly of photon packages of light. That's why people have instincts and intuitions about you. That's why people feel like they already know you, because the information about you didn't come out of your mouth. It came out of the packages of information that are emanating out of you. So now, as you breathe in, imagine that it's a metaphor for all of consciousness supporting you with every piece of information that you need. And imagine that as you breathe out, all of your askings are also breathing out of your cells. And then consciousness is responding, and then you're breathing in again. Imagine that it's that simple. Now, 0 pointing doesn't require any effort, because 0 point is just an is. So as we presence ourselves to our connection to all that is, and to the space between the atoms, where most of the intelligence that runs everything in this world exists, including the agreement that 3 dimensions exist, that colors are colors, that yellow looks like yellow. All of those are based on photon packages of light and our little interpretation devices called eyes, and us all agreeing that that's a color. So we ultimately have the power to agree to this reality or not. So as we breathe in, imagine that the birth of planets, the birth of water, the birth of land, the birth of volcanoes, the birth of human beings, the birth of all of our 3-dimensional abilities and senses, the birth of all of our multidimensional ability of our senses, all came from the asking of creation to experience itself more deeply. And then in the space between the atoms, the mechanism there is such that new possibilities can be created, and that being a human being itself, with all of our 3-dimensional skills and multidimensional skills, is actually in and of itself evidence of exactly that 0 point where there was nothing and now there's something. It just existed as a potential for creation, God to express itself in a 3-dimensional way, creating in a dimension it had never been before. So that space between the atoms, which is really the soup in which everything swims, is filled with everything you've ever asked for. It's like a proverbial toy box of magnitude that you can't even wrap your mind around, of possibilities for how solutions and quantum leaps for change can happen beyond the tiny little pea brain's conception of whatever was. The ideas that will change the world cannot exist in your mind, in your memory, from all of the intelligence you ever learned, from all of the wisdom that you've ever gleaned, from all of the informational shows you've ever watched. the ideas to change what is have to come from places that are beyond what already is, that are beyond what already explains what is. The ideas necessarily have to come as ideas that never were before, just like human beings came from there. Now, from this place, imagine right now as we sit, you have cells. The cells are made up of atoms. The atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and as we sit here, there's nothing new under the sun. You've always had the space between the atoms. You've always existed with pure potential, but you've operated in the world concerned more about managing and controlling what is, coping with, wrestling with, struggling with, dancing with what is. Oh, well, it is what it is, we say. But in reality, the more we spend time being in the land of the unknown and presencing ourselves to our creativity and our potential and the space between the atoms, which, by the way, we are mostly comprised of, the space between the atoms, more than 90%. Consciousness has been trying to tell us all along that that's where the thrill of life comes from. So what's on the other side? What does it look like to actually live that way? This is the important piece. To give language to what's on the other side, to give language to the pure potential of what it looks like to live in a way where you're in a body on a planet in 3D, but as a creator consciousness, you've actually brought the pure potential of heavenly flow to Earth. What does it actually look like to live that way? Well, what it looks like is you have much less interest in collecting evidence for what is or what might be based on your history. And you start having much more interest in the potential answer that your mind hasn't already caught up with, that lies in the 0 point, that lies in the point where all of the questions have been asked and all of the polarities have been considered, and where all the considerations have been thought of and all of the resources of the universe cross. There's a 0 point where a new solution has been made manifest in all of consciousness, but it has not yet come to be in 3D. So you would spend a lot more time concerning yourself with the solutions that have not yet come to fruition. And then not only that, getting excited about the idea that you can actually do that. But not only that, understanding that as you get excited about that, and not only excited about that, but you just go about your life without now being in fear because you know the solutions have already been made manifest. As you develop your knowing, as you remember that that's the way it was always meant to be, you start to relax a little bit. And in your relaxation, what ends up happening is you start to experience more of the 0 point solutions than you've ever experienced before in your entire life. What we know for sure is that that is going to take some practice. So what does one do in a body on a planet as a 3-dimensional being who actually, it would appear, lives in 3 dimensions, but we soon forget that we don't live in 3 dimensions. We live in multi-dimensions, and this is just a pinpoint idea that came from consciousness, that came to fruition in 3D in order for the rest of you to express. Let us say it again. This 3-dimensional reality, including your body, is simply the exact result of what we're speaking of. It is the result of an idea in the mind of all of creation, which is your original parent. that gave birth to the very idea that there could be a three-dimensional existence through which all of creation could pour as its own personality. You literally are a multidimensional state pouring through a three-dimensional being. So, to activate the potential of the shift for your life and for all of humanity, it first takes the choice. The choice is, do I choose or not to spend more of my time being childlike and curious? You have to choose to be childlike. The second choice is, do you choose to actually be more interested in the potentials for change that were already created, that already exists in the space between the atoms? Do you choose to live in that place more? The third thing is, once you've chosen, what do you actually do? Would you be willing to take some action to consciously bring yourself to collect evidence in your life with something that we call an evidence journal? Our friend Natalie Ledwell came up with that idea. An evidence journal for things being created from nothing. Finding your right car, finding your right mate, finding a certain relationship, meeting a new friend you feel like you've known for years, getting a free vacation. Would you be willing to collect evidence for times when you are already in the 0 point? When you already allowed yourself to be 0 pointed, such that you know that the possibility exists. And then finally, if you did that on a daily basis, 11 things a day, 11 new things a day, that will start to open your doorway, start to open the portal. Then you have the possibility of learning the skills. It isn't about learning the skills first so then you can have confidence. It's about seeing that you are already doing it so that you have the confidence that then you can fast track this ability far beyond what you ever imagined by already being open to it and understanding you've already been doing it. This ability is about living both at 0 point and in 3D at the same time, rather than living in the duality that they're separate. This is about evolving your corpus callosum, the space between the possible mind, the right brain, and the left brain. This is about activating the corpus callosum so it's more interested in having both the heavenly world and this three-dimensional world be one and the same. The corpus callosum is where polarity ends. Your receptor sites are where polarity ends. We start to live as one, not as one with each other, but as one with all of creation. And 0 pointing your life is how we do that. It stops being about the masculine, the feminine, the left and the right, the haves and the have-nots, the black and the white, and everything in between. It starts being about being a human, bringing heaven with you wherever you go. Everybody breathe.